So with Katalin Čeh, we'll be talking about the democratic backsliding and state capture in Hungary, about future prospects of decapturing the state, about parallels with Serbia and other countries in the Western Balkans and elsewhere in the world, and the role of the European Union in responding to this illiberal challenge, both from within and externally.
Katalin Čeh is a Canadian-born Hungarian physician and politician. She studied medicine in Budapest and health economics in the Netherlands before starting her political career at Momentum Movement, a fresh center progressive political party established in 2017. She was one of the founding members of the party, and later she became a candidate for the European parliamentary elections in 2019. After taking up her mandate in the European Parliament, she was elected for the position of Vice President of Renew Europe fraction. Katalin is working actively as a member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, the Subcommittee on Human Rights, and the Delegation for Relations with the United States. She plays an active role in the European Parliament's Gender Mainstreaming Network, as well as in the Anti-Corruption Intergroup as a bureau member. More recently, her reports on the challenges for urban areas in the post-COVID-19 era and on the protection of the European Union's financial interests have been widely approved in the European Parliament. In the meantime, Katalin remains to keep up the hard work for the European people and for achieving the common goals of the European Union.
So, Katalin, Jona Podkivanok.
Dobar dan.
Dobar dan. First of all, welcome to Serbia, a country that in many ways resembles your own. Symbolically, our two countries had parliamentary elections in April on the same day, 3rd of April. And in Hungary, despite all hopes for a democratic renewal, with the ruling party won with approximately 54% of the vote. Orban's Fidesz received the highest vote share by any party since the fall of communism, if I'm not mistaken, in '89. So how did this happen, actually?
Well, this is a question that I'm posing to myself over and over again ever since April 3. Because we really believed, I think all of us believe that we can change the system. There was so much hope from Europe and also from other corners of the world looking at us, at the Hungarian opposition, with so much expectation. And I am still devastated that we couldn't deliver for the people, for the millions of Hungarians who have been hoping for a change. I am so troubled to see my country going backwards, you know. I was a member of the generation who was born into a democracy, who never had to experience repression, and who thought that an upward trajectory towards democracy and Europe are a given. And just very recently, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, we saw everything turning back. And I think the state of the media, the judiciary, but also the state capture that is really stifling public debate in Hungary just makes it very, very hard for everybody who is fighting for change. But we are not giving up, and we are trying to move forward from this point.
Yes, and there are many similarities, and this is why I will ask you this question, because unlike in Serbia, Hungarian opposition took part in the elections on a single ticket, from left, center to the very right. Are such non-traditional political and social coalitions the only way to dethrone the regime, such as ours in Hungary or Serbia, or there are other ways? Because in Serbia it didn't take place like that, and our results were equally poor for the opposition.
Well, these are just technicalities, I have to say, and I believe that the Hungarian opposition had its hopes too high on especially these solutions, how to run, who is leading the ticket, what are the combinations, when I believe what people are really looking for is a strong and stable vision in times of conflict, in times of war, in terms of terrible aggression raging in our neighborhood. we failed to be able to show the vision of a democratic, free, and prosperous Hungary that we would like to establish. So if I can give any advice to anybody, and I know that I'm not the best person to take advices from, given the results the Hungarian opposition had, but it's really to concentrate on the message, because people need alternatives. In times like these, it is very, very difficult to be in the center, to be the voice of reason, the voice of progress. Extremes are rising, and we just need a better offer, a better alternative, and a stronger way to lead the country forward.
Thank you very much. I mean, that really resonates with what we have been experiencing here as well. I want to maybe go back a little bit in history. You were talking about your generation, and I'm of a slightly different one. And back in the late 1990s, a group of Serbian dissidents fled Slobodan Milošević and his dictatorial regime, and we found refuge in Hungary. So, I remember this very vividly in an open-air tavern just under the Buda Castle. We dreamt of a democratic Serbia. And ironically, it was Viktor Orban's government that offered us refuge at the time, and the free space to work towards free democratic change in our country. And what happened to Fidesz over the last decades? I mean, did a certain brand of European, North American anti-communism always carry in itself the seeds of the present populist right wing, or did something else happen in the meantime?
Well, my grandparents were part of the anti-communists of Hungary, and they were fighting the past system for a very long time. They were the ones who listened to Radio Free Europe, and they were also the ones who always had their suitcase packed in case somebody comes for them at the middle of the night. And I can tell you, anti-communism is not the same as the illiberal populism that Orban is building up right now. Anti-communism always had democracy at its heart, the respect of the individual freedoms, the respect of the free market that they are trampling on. So what we see now is an individual's strive for power. Mr. Orban has been everywhere, from the liberal radicalism to centrist pro-European, conservative, and now he is actually extreme right.
Yes,
he created the very antithesis of what he was fighting for originally when he began his journey. And actually, I think he betrayed millions of Hungarians who put their hopes in his hand.
And to quote one of my favorite bands from my youth, Guns N' Roses, nothing lasts forever. So one day, Orban's regime will end as well, like will ours in Serbia. And how to decapture the Hungarian state after that?
Well, it won't be easy, I'm telling you. The destruction of institutions every single day makes it harder and harder for us to rebuild. But I think the key is here at the level of institutions, at the level of stable and long-lasting guarantees for freedom, for human rights, for checks and balances. This is what we have to achieve. But we also need something else. And this is a change of generation, new minds, new ideas, new visions. And this is why I am working in my party in the Momentum movement that I founded with some former high school classmates 6 years ago, because we believe that there is new idea that is necessary to make Hungary to a pro-European democracy once again. Fresh ways of thinking, innovation, sustainability. We need new faces for a new generation. So this is what I'm hoping will be the key for change.
Your story was indeed an amazing one, how you stopped the organization of the Olympic Games that would be overly costly for your city and country. And I think, it inspired many around the wider region, I would say. I would like to maybe come back to the Western Balkans and Serbia. And whereas the EU is highly critical of Orban's regimes, and tries to use instruments at its disposal to combat illiberalism and state capture in your own country, at least local perception in Serbia and the Western Balkans is that the EU is not doing enough to counter exactly the same regimes in our countries. So why such a difference in your view?
You know, I'm not sure if there's a difference, but for a different reason. I think the EU is not doing enough to fight illiberal populism, nor internally, neither externally. Hungary's system deteriorated to a state where it wouldn't be accepted to the EU if we would apply it right now. And this happened under the watchful eye of the European legislators. So they are not having the instruments in place to stop existing member states from backsliding either. But the way how neither during the pre-accession process are the protection of democracy, European values and human rights appreciated enough is something that I have to agree with you. It's there and it's a real problem that this problem exists. Commissioner Varhey should do much more on this field to stand up for European values, because he is representing the European Commission. Commissioners do not represent their member states, and I really hope that everybody is taking this principle as seriously as they should. Yeah. The road to the EU has to be paved with guarantees for the citizens of Serbia, who deserve their human rights, their equal freedoms, and a safe and sustainable environment, just like anybody else. And the process to EU accession should be the process that provides these guarantees for them. Because the EU is a club where you get a lot of benefits also, but of course there are a lot of regulations to adhere to. And the EU can only be a strong and prosperous and credible actor on the global stage if we can put our values front and center in every action we do, both internally and externally as well.
Thank you very much. I mean, that is really true. It's not my place to make comments here, but I really agree with you that much more can be done in the accession process. You spoke about the war before, and that completely, I would say, changed everything in Europe, really, since 24th of February. And both of our regimes nurture a close relationship with Putin's Russia. Why is Orban doing this? Because in Serbia, superficial polling shows a high degree of support for Putin's Russia amongst the population. How is it like in Hungary?
Well, it's just devastating for me to observe this, honestly. Hungary has a very, very painful history with similar events that are happening in Ukraine right now. We had the 1956 revolution, yes, when we were also looking at the West for help against the oppression from Russia. This is one of our most important historic days. And a country with such a tradition, how can our leadership be so much against helping those who are oppressed? The way how the election campaign really centered around the war, around the lies that Mr. Orban was spreading, that were straight out of Putin's propaganda book, is absolutely devastating to hear. They are taking the sides of the oppressor, and they are using their unlimited public resources to try to brainwash the Hungarian citizens. Whereas if you are at the Hungarian-Ukrainian border, at the Hungarian side, you can sometimes hear the sirens at night. We have a very sizable Hungarian minority in Ukraine who are dying at the battlefronts. And our government, Mr. Orban, chose not to help him, but to continue to cuddle off with Mr. Putin. But eventually, I believe that Hungarians are good at heart. And the way how we accepted the refugees from Ukraine is really showing the true face of the nation. Because the face of the nation is not Mr. Orban, but those who welcomed their refugees into their homes, cooked their own food, and made it possible for them to stay there as long as they needed to.
Yeah, my father, who is yet of another generation, my late father, was born prior to the Second World War, and he was telling me a lot about 1956. He was probably from that similar kind of upbringing as your grandparents, of liberal, democratic opposition to the communist regime, and this is precisely why, because of I know 56 very well, I cannot comprehend why is Orban doing this. I mean, why is he deliberately creating a certain image, a distorted image of the situation in Ukraine with the Hungarian population? Because, as I said here, at least we can say the distorted image is kind of there, you know. But I mean, our regime does it as well. But is there like some popular support for Putin, or why is Orban doing this?
Well, right now the polls are very scary. Only 3% of the government supporters believe that the war is Russia's responsibility. 3%, can you imagine that?
Yes, yes.
And this is just the result of a relentless media campaign against Ukraine that has been lasting for so many months. At every television channel, at the billboards, it was the center topic of the election campaign. Outrageous lies were spread that if the opposition would have won, Hungary would be bombed. If the opposition would have won, there would be austerity, and there would be power cuts, and there would be high energy prices and inflation. Well, Hungary is not bombed now, thanks God. But all the other problems are there just as much as they painted. It's just they're fighting against.
They're fighting, it seems, against the shadows created by the regime.
They are fighting against themselves, you know.
Yes,
they are fighting against. They're fighting a propaganda war when a real battle is fought at our neighborhood, where and why they are chasing these terrible Russian propaganda images when there is a real war to be won, when kindergartens are being bombed, when innocent people die. How can they take the side of the oppressor? It's just unbelievable for me, really. And of course, this changed public perception in a way. But I have to say, this has not started during the war. So Orban's relationship with Putin has been totally incomprehensible for me for almost a decade now. The financial ties that were conducted in secrecy in the background, the construction of the nuclear power plant from Russian support, the way how Orban has been harboring Russian Secret Service personnel in Hungary, the way they gave diplomatic clearance to the Russian investment bank, and also the way how Orban has been voting as a Trojan horse of Vladimir Putin in the European Council is just absolutely disgraceful.
That's all maybe leads me to the other question, and because we also see an extremely close relationship between Orban's regime, the regime of Aleksandar Vučić in Serbia, and Milorad Dodik in Republika Srpska. Orban even gave him support in the elections, a very open support. And I'm really curious about this, because in mid-2000s, Fidesz approach was totally different. So the local perception, at least in Serbia, was that it was even fomenting irredentism in Vojvodina, you know, and they're using every opportunity to, you know, to criticize Serbian human rights record, and sometimes it was completely justified. But the way in which they did it was, for example, I remember very vividly in 2004 we had incidents in Vojvodina, and some of them were based on ethnic differences, but often not. But it was very much related to the moment in which Serbia found itself. You know, democratic change took place in 2000. It took a long time, you know, to get the state under control by the new regime, and even we got our prime minister killed in 2003 by the old forces. And so, you know, eventually the regime settled, the democratic regime, the situation in Vojvodina. And then, after everything ended in 2005, before the elections in 2006 in Hungary, I don't know if you ever had this experience in the European Parliament, but in the AFET committee, I was there. I think it was Dunaj Televisio.
Okay.
They were live transmitting a hearing about ethnic tensions in Vojvodina 1 year after these tensions ended, and the Fidesz MPs were in the lead on that. So what happened in the meantime that the approach totally changed? Now there is this brotherhood with arguably a much more nationalistic Serbian government. Then it was not the case, you know. So how do you explain this?
Well, in 2009, the European election program of Fidesz contained remarks like the European Public Prosecutor's Office should be mandatory. It contained also remarks that states that destroy rule of law should be financially punished and sanctioned. They also believed in a federal Europe. So it was a very, very different party, but the same people, just for the sake of power and for the sake of their own perceived internal political goals, totally took a U-turn and went the other way, disrespecting a lot of things that they were standing for, and the way how they are seeking allegiances with Mr. Vučić and Mr. Dodik are, unfortunately, just another page in the same playbook. Orban wants to create his own new center of influence as he is increasingly isolated in the European Union, but he's playing a very, very dangerous game here. The instances where he gave support to Mr. Dodik are extremely wrongly timed, and the developments in the Republika Srpska are clearly posing a huge risk for destabilizing the entire region. And I believe that Orban is just like meddling in this for shady financial gains, for his own power interests, and he is really playing for this, playing with the safety and security of so many people who are living in these countries. And I find it very, very dangerous.
But thank you very much. I mean, I think we have a lot to digest here, and I think many struggles ahead, and I hope we'll repeat this experience in better political circumstances in both countries, and I'm sure this day will come, like the Guns N' Roses song says.
Absolutely. We need to change our countries in order to fight for a strong European Union, where Serbia is also a member, a strong union that is a player at the global stage fighting for democracy, and we can only do this together. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you.